Outriders is available on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox platforms, and PC. I reviewed the game on an Xbox Series X while always playing on the highest world tier that was available. Outriders is a third-person looter shooter that you can play in co-op with your friends, as one of 4 super-powered classes on a foreign hostile planet. The planet itself is tainted by a mysterious anomaly that causes widespread disaster and mutates the wildlife. If that weren't bad enough, several douchebag humans go full human by being absolute bastards that you will also have to fight, and I'm getting serious deja vu here. I feel like I've played and reviewed something with a very similar concept, right down to the strange unexplainable space magic doing weird shit. Except I think you used mech suits instead of mutant powers. Oh yeah, Anthem. The good news is, Outriders is actually good. Anthem and Outriders share the same DNA, but much like the twins, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, one became a superpowered independent badass, and the other is dead. Seriously though, Outriders knocked some gameplay concepts out of the park, to the point that playing it has retroactively made other looter games worse in my own eyes. It's not a perfect game by any means, however, so stick around and I'll show you both sides. There are early story spoilers present in this review. I was initially fascinated by the game's lengthy intro sequence, even though it was quite a while before I got to pick my class. It begins with your character and a group of Outriders stepping foot onto Enoch for the first time, to perform some final checks before calling down the rest of humanity. I was enthralled. Not many games do the brand new planet thing, at least without any degree of care. I wanted to learn about and explore Enoch at the same time as my character, and I was interested in the cast. Sadly, that feeling of discovery was very brief before the game fast-forwarded 30 years into a post-apocalyptic future. It's a waste of the entire concept. Aside from humans, monsters are one of your biggest adversaries, which are mutated wildlife following the apocalypse. Okay, Outriders, you do realize, since I never got to know the actual wildlife of Enoch, that there's no difference, right? Alien wildlife would have been just as alien to me as mutants because I have no point of reference for what was mutated in the first place. The likable characters interested in the new frontier either die or turn into cold hard jackasses, which also makes up 90% of the entire cast of the whole game. Enoch and everyone in it sucks. Except for your character, mostly. Outriders goes halfsies on how to handle the player character. You create and name your character, but you don't make dialogue or moral choices for them. They are a pre-established persona. Instead of making them a fully developed character, Outriders opted for generic badass instead. They neither feel like your character or an established person. Your character has no personality outside of being a badass, and it makes it really hard to connect with them. There are definitely a few lines that made me go, okay, I do wish I was that cool.
Mr. Chang sends his regard. Oh, come on! It's right in the middle of my line.
You were taking too long.
Planning it all the way here.
Thanks for the rescue anyway.
Other times they use words like dunderhead, and I change my mind. Enoch itself is gorgeous, and you do explore a wide range of environments from snow-covered mountains, lush jungles, desert towns, and old ruins. The lore, plotline, and world remain fascinating despite my griping, and I was curious about what was going on the whole way through. A few twists even managed to catch me off guard, and I did end up liking a few of the characters. It ends in a satisfying manner while leaving room for additional story content. However, once the curtain is pulled back on what happened on Enoch, it most certainly feels like an overused cliché.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague.
Outriders is a third-person cover shooter that doesn't feel anything like a cover shooter, and it's kind of brilliant. Each of the 4 classes plays significantly different from one another, and can be played and built several ways within each class. Your use of cover depends highly on your class and playstyle. This is partially due to how Outriders handles healing. Each class heals a different way, but they all benefit from being aggressive. This is not a shooting gallery game. A Pyromancer heals by killing enemies marked by their abilities. This generally means that they were on fire. A Trickster generates shields by killing enemies up close, while the Devastator regenerates health by doing the same thing. A Technomancer simply gets a boost to lifesteal from all the damage they do. I played every class, but my main was the Devastator, a tanky class that wields earth and gravity. My partner's main was a Technomancer. Watching us play together looked as though we were playing 2 entirely different games. She used cover, sniped from a distance, and used gadgets like a cryogenic turret. I, on the other hand, only took cover for brief respites. I was gravity jumping on top of enemies, catching bullets with a magnetic shield, and rhino charging through their ranks.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Combat is intense and visceral. There's a lot of feedback as enemies react to being shot, either by flinching or being knocked down. Enemies can be frozen, exploded, shattered, and otherwise gibbed into an explosion of gore. The variety of effects from your Outrider's powers manifest in spectacular ways, from burned enemies poofing away like Spider-Man, to the Trickster straight up imploding them through time-space shenanigans. The combat is smart, despite the fast pace. Different enemies require different tactics, from snipers, armored foes, or even captains wielding random assortments of superpowers. The game also throws hordes, and hordes, and hordes of enemies at you. It strikes a clean balance between making you feel like a powerful beast cutting through swaths of cannon fodder, and handing you your own ass if you get too arrogant. A large part of that balance is the brilliant world tier system. You slowly increase your world tier by playing on the highest one available. Each world tier increases the difficulty, but also yields higher rewards, and anytime you die, you lose some progress toward the next tier. Die too often, and it's probably a sign that you're biting off more than you can chew and need to dial it back until you get better gear. The tier system constantly plays push and pull with the players. You will gear up and begin cutting through your enemies like butter, and you can enjoy feeling overpowered. Just when that novelty will start to wear thin, your tier will increase, and you'll have to fight hard to win again. And that cycle repeats for the entire game. If the difficulty pushes too hard for your own taste, there's nothing stopping you from dropping the world tier back down. It's a clever implementation that I really enjoy, and it's a bit more meaningful than just easy, normal, hard. Outriders isn't all great marvels, however. There's a bit of DC mediocrity in there.
Wow, it's like a cave. Like a bat cave.
No, seriously, my partner and I contended with numerous disconnects throughout our playtime together. Enemy variety also leaves something to be desired. There's actually a lot of enemy types split between human and monstrous enemies, and the boss fights are awesome. But Outriders features a lengthy campaign and meaningful endgame. Combat is really the one thing you do in Outriders, and you're going to fight those enemies a lot. It becomes really frustrating when you factor in the variety of quote-unquote factions in the game. You fight several human factions, all of which are very different from each other thematically. Gameplay-wise, they are mostly the same. They have the same enemy types, just named differently, and they occasionally have a quirk or two, such as poison grenades. One late game faction makes this incredibly disappointing, as they should be completely different compared to the others, and the moment you fight them, you're gonna roll your eyes.
Oh, there's a big surprise! That's an incredible... I think I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise!
I also have to pick on the concept of self-revives. In multiplayer, you can revive yourself one time per combat. You can't do it at all in single player, so it really comes off as catering to low attention spans, as if it's completely taboo that your brain isn't being vigorously masturbated to the shiny effects and spray of gore for a whole 10 seconds for your team to either revive you or die. As someone with ADHD, it's almost insulting. If someone can't wait a bit because they died without deleting the game from their hard drive, that's a personal problem, and catering to it really throws the game's fine balance straight out the window. My partner and I opted to never use the self-revives because it trivialized the game. Giving each person on the team one free life completely alters how you play. You can be completely reckless and know that you're essentially invincible the first time. Your teammates can already revive you an infinite amount of times, so it's really a silly mechanic. The self-imposed restriction worked fine for us, but it also limited our ability to play with others, since trying to impose it on others would be a real dick move on my part. I'd rather have it universally imposed on everyone by it not existing at all. I know that sounds more dickish, but there's a difference between wanting a balanced game and me waggling my finger at a stranger for using something that the developer put in the game, even if that thing is stupid.
I said...
Where Outriders puts the competition to shame is the loot and character build system. Loot is meaningful, with awesome and tangible effects. I know I may have said that in a few other reviews of games in this genre, but Outriders hadn't existed yet. Now that it does, I'll look at those other loot systems with an upturned nose and superior arrogance.
I mean, you expect me to give my blessings to this thing?
All loot comes with statistical values, and while those might not be the most exciting thing ever, they actually have a great deal of influence on how you build your character, especially when combined with the massive branching skill trees of each class. Skill points are very limited, so you have to pick and choose wisely, but you can respec at any time and try out new ideas with any loot you might have acquired. I built a Mega Tank Devastator with massive melee damage. I built another version where I stacked and healed myself through bleed damage, and a third build where I focused on the power of my earth abilities. But beyond mere statistics is the massive array of mods that can appear on weapons and armor, and you can gain these mods by dismantling the item in question. This allows you to place them on other pieces of gear to mix and match for however you want to play. Mods can have all kinds of effects, from bullets that freeze enemies, ones that make them explode when they're killed, ones that leech life for you, or even alter your class abilities. For example, my partner had a Technomancer build that focused on freezing enemies, and she could convert her toxic spewing turret to an ice-based one instead. You can level up pieces of gear, convert them into variants of the same weapon, such as a burst or full auto assault rifle, change the mods, and increase any stat boost they already grant. One time I went for straight firepower and weapon leech by focusing on those stats, and you definitely feel the difference between builds. The combinations can get roguelite levels of crazy.
Well... do ya? Punks?
It's a ton of fun, and the variety is huge. Furthermore, armor changes the appearance of your character, and the coveted legendary weapons look crazy. The endgame of Outriders is all about those. You end up going on timed drop pod missions to earn a currency specifically for buying legendaries, and it's a great endgame mode. It still suffers from a lack of enemy variety, but by the end, the character build and modding system are blown wide open, and you can really flex your muscles on it. Being able to respec your skills is fantastic. I wish it was as easy when it comes to other classes. Sometimes I'm tired of the rock and roll of my Devastator, and I just want to light things on fire as the Pyromancer.
Too much? I went too far.
It's a long marathon to catch a second or third class up to your first one. Cutscenes never show your character using specific powers, so your choice isn't canon. I'd have really liked to be able to switch between them. It's the one thing that I believe Anthem did better. In many ways, Outriders is the perfect example of how a co-op looter shooter should be. The crafting and character build system undoubtedly raised the bar for any to come in the future. The combat is thrilling, unique, and a blast to play. The visceral action and superpowers simply feel good.
Homelander?
You boys okay?
The game's campaign is lengthy, and the endgame is satisfying. The 4 classes all play significantly different, and the build variety within each one is off the charts. It's a shame that the enemy variety is so limited, especially when the game pits you against several different factions that all feel the same. That's the largest thing holding Outriders back. The action simply gets repetitive. The story is also a mixed bag. Your character is too one-note to be interesting by themselves, and you don't make any choices to truly make them yours. The world itself is interesting, but falls into a lot of common cliches. The 4 classes are so different that you're missing a huge chunk of the game if you only play one of them, but having to level each one individually is painful and makes the enemy variety issue stick out far more. Also, screw that self-revive mechanic, seriously. The bottom line is, Outriders is still a great game, and in a lot of ways it's the absolute best iteration of the looter shooter genre out there. The repetition is a bummer, but the combat, class, and loot system is worth writing it out for. The amount of playstyle customization you have access to is a true anomaly. To recap, the pros. 4 classes with very different playstyles. Visceral, weighty, super-powered combat. Incredibly deep crafting, mod, and character building system. A lengthy campaign and solid endgame. An interesting world. The world tier system is a great implementation of push and pull difficulty. The boss fights are rad. The loot changes your appearance, and that's a nice touch. A variety of great looking environments. The cons. The setting swaps from interesting New Frontier to post-apocalypse early on. That's a bummer. Limited enemy variety can get repetitive. Your character's personality is bland, generic, and one-note. The self-revive mechanic is silly. Classes must be leveled individually. It's a pain. Disconnecting issues in multiplayer were annoying. Overall, I give Outriders an 8.0 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, liking and subscribing is immensely helpful. I've also left several links down into the description below. One on my website where you can find the bulk of my written content, one on my creator store where you can buy games that support this content, and my Ko-fi page if you feel like throwing in a donation. In any case, thanks for watching, and until next time.